everybody, welcome to my YouTube channel. It's Keisha Lance Bottoms. I'm so excited for so many reasons. As my friend Terry Vaughn said, right now I'm living in the flow. So this doesn't mean that I'm about to be a professional cook, but what it does mean is that now that I'm not in office, I have a chance to spend more time doing the things that I absolutely love, and that's being in the kitchen. So welcome to Keisha's Kitchen. I am a very messy cook. Baking reminds me so much of my childhood. My grandmother was a baker, and going into my grandparents' house, just smelling the cakes and the pies used to bring me so much joy. This recipe today is a whipping cream pound cake that actually didn't come from my grandmother. It came from my husband's grandmother. She was a great cook too. And thankfully, before she passed, my husband liked her pound cake so much, I wrote it down. So this is something I wish I had done more with my grandmother. But in my immature mind, I thought if I write down the recipes, that means she's going to die one day and won't be here to tell me what to do. Well, that's what happens in life. People pass on. That's the circle of life. So there's some recipes that I had from her, some I wish that I had from her. So just as we're playing around in the kitchen, you'll see me try some things that may be family recipes or some things I just pull off the internet, because even when I was mayor of Atlanta and working in the White House, I was still a mama. And my biggest challenge every day is, what will all of my kids like to eat? What will my husband like to eat? He's really picky. But everybody pretty much agrees on this pound cake. So I'm going to show you how it works. I got my first mixer probably 20 years ago. Mixers aren't inexpensive. I think you can get them for maybe $250 or so now. But if you like baking, if you can afford to get one, I highly recommend it. It just makes everything easier. And I still have my first mixer. I still use it at Christmas time. I use two at a time because I do a lot of baking at Christmas time. All the other little supplies that you'll see, you can just order those online somewhere. So this is a sifter. So I use this Swan's Down flour, and you sift your flour because you want to make it lighter. So it's already pretty light because it's a cake flour, and it's real easy. You just turn this. When my daughter is here and she likes to help bake, this is something that's good for kids to help you with. You just sift it up and the flour gets a little lighter. And again, I'm going to remind you, I'm a messy cook. Like I said, I'm not a professional yet. I just like to cook. Your comments about how messy I am, I know you don't have to tell me. So this is butter. A lot of people use unsalted butter when they bake. I don't. I just, it's probably not the healthiest thing, but the salted butter for me is just a little tastier. And even with, her name was Nan, even with Nan's recipe, I've changed it up a little bit. And my grandmother would always tell me it's fine to change up recipes, and she also would tell me if a box cake works, use a box cake. You don't always have to do things from scratch. So I have this book called The Cake Doctor. I make a red velvet cake from a box cake and I add different things to it. So we'll do that another day. Anyway, I put my 3 sticks of butter in there. We add 3 cups of sugar. And I remember this recipe usually, but sometimes I just go back at it to make sure I'm still doing it right. So this is what you call creaming the butter. So you start creaming the butter. I've had this sitting out for a while. Ideally, you want your butter to be room temperature. And then I'm going to add 3 cups of sugar. Now, let me just give you a little advice while you're baking. Maybe your attention span is better than mine. But if I'm talking on the phone or somebody comes in here talking to me, I will forget where I am in my instructions, my recipe. So, to avoid that, you can sort out your ingredients beforehand, which might be a smart thing to do. Or you can just not talk while you're baking. So hopefully I won't forget today. So you cream this butter and it will stick to the mixer, so you have to like take it down. And you know, and I hear people say that they can't bake or cook. Just follow the recipe. Like if I'm following even something, if obviously I can read a recipe, or if that's challenging for you, if I'm following a recipe on Instagram, I just keep starting it over and over and over again. I do a little better with reading. It's just how I comprehend information. But just think about how you best take in information. Like I said, if it's something on Instagram, just keep watching it over and over. And you gotta remember, even with this recipe that I'm showing you all, you know, it's probably, you know, it's going to be edited really nicely. So when things go up on YouTube and when they go up on Instagram or other platforms, just don't go for perfection, because most of the time that's probably not perfect when you see it. Right now I'm adding 6 eggs at a time. Again, another thing that I probably shouldn't do, but I do. I crack my eggs directly in here. Like the first egg that I crack, I just got a shell in there, so I had to pull it out. So I try and pay attention and not mix while I'm cracking in case I put a shell in there. And I'm sure there's some professional who will say I shouldn't do it this way. But it's the way I've been doing it for a long time. So. Now, on my oven, I preheated my oven to 350. Nan's recipe calls for 300, but Nan also made her cake in a bundt pan. You may know what a bundt pan is. That's a round cake pan. I used to make mine that way. I don't do it anymore simply because it's easier when I'm having big events. I like to slice my cake up and then slice it in half. I don't know about your family and friends, but I'll have people come over here and take a whole fourth of a piece of cake, so I don't leave it up for people to slice their own cake. I do it just like in the church basement. I cut it and then I cut it in half, and sometimes little fourth pieces, and lay it out. If people want more, they can come back and get more, but they're not taking a whole hunk of cake at a time. But you can use a 2-pan if your family and friends are a little more thoughtful. In that way, you can use a 2-pan or a bundt pan, but I like to do mine. I use these, they're bread pans. It's also easy when I am giving out cakes for the holidays, which I tend to do. Then I can just wrap them up and put a bow on them, and I can bake them 2 at a time. I even have smaller pans. I have some half the size of this and then half the size of that. And what I like about this whipping cream pound cake, it's a good base. Sometimes I'll make it as a lemon pound cake. I've played around with it. I've made it as a chocolate pound cake. You can puree some sweet potatoes and put some cinnamon in it and do a sweet potato pound cake. I love strawberry cakes. I hadn't tried it as a strawberry cake yet, but I am going to do that. I've done like a poppy seed cake. I've done like a lemon basil cake. One day I had a cake tasting and just had all these different things I played around with, and it's a really good base. So if I'm going back to Nan's recipe, at this point you alternate the flour that you saw me sifting with the whipping cream. So I already poured the 2 cups of whipping cream in here, and that's just essentially a heavy cream. And you'll see like some ingredients I use are the store brand, some not. This is actually the whipping cream that I prefer. It's just tastier to me. And this is where when I'm baking and I'm talking, I lose track. So I'm going to keep counting. So that was 1. So now I'm doing my second one. Now this is number 3 of the flour. I try and level it off. You know, I'm just a working mama, so you see all this mess around here. I do not consider myself a professional cook. And even when people say they are a great cook, that kind of scares me, because you set yourself up for failure. So this is a half cup, so you're doing 3.5 cups. I try not to assign what I think about my cooking. I let other people decide for me. So this is a really thick batter right now. So we got all of our flour and whipping cream in. Then, if I were strictly following the recipe from Nan, I would just do 2 teaspoons of vanilla. But again, I've played around with this recipe for a lot of years. One secret I found, I like to add butter extract. And I don't just do 1 teaspoon. I do like a whole tablespoon. And it makes it more buttery. You can smell the butter. And then I do the vanilla. Again, I do a tablespoon. And this is just after years, like I said, sometimes I do lemon and then I do almond just because I love almond. What you have to do at this point, you have to make sure that this is blended good, because if all these extract oils aren't blended, it will be kind of oily in the cake. It doesn't bother me. I like the way it tastes. The great thing about this cake, the longer it sits, the more flavorful it gets. Like, I don't always love it as soon as I take it out of the oven. Some people like warm cakes. I like this one the next day and the next day because the flavor kind of sets in. So, again, if this were Nan making this cake, and even my grandmother would put her oil and flour. I cheat. I just buy it in the can. So it's your oil and it's your flour together. And y'all, my hands, I did wash my hands, but this batter, you know, obviously it's a thick batter. I don't want to waste any of it. I used to make all of my kids' birthday cakes, and that was one thing I really missed because baking was relaxing for me. So I would just try different recipes, but when I would make my kids' birthday cakes, I would do like a yellow cake, a strawberry cake, and a chocolate cake. And I would do this homemade frosting, the cream cheese frosting. And I would get food coloring and color them different colors. So, you know, it's funny when you have a bunch of kids around at a birthday party. They're like, oh, I want the pink one. I want this. And they would be the same cake. Pretty much. The kids liked that they got to pick their own color. So now I really don't bake that much. I bake at holidays. And it's funny, I used to have a really big sweet tooth when I was a kid. As I've gotten older, I don't have as big of a sweet tooth. And I think part of that happened during the pandemic. I stopped consuming as much sugar and salt. And I just kind of, you know, my palate has changed a bit. I bake at holidays. Whenever we do family stuff, whoever is hosting will do the big things, but they'll always say, you bring such. So usually I bring something baked. Now, what my grandmother used to do, she would start probably around Thanksgiving cooking for Christmas, because my grandmother baked a cake for everybody in our family. She had 5 kids, so everybody got a cake, plus my cousin Dorothy and her family got a cake. So she would start baking and she would start freezing cakes. And I always say, I'm going to do that. No, ever do it. Now, before I started baking, I put the oven on 350 to warm it up. Again, Nan's recipe would be 300 for a bundt cake. Depends on your oven. You just have to play around with it. I have a convection oven setting on my oven, which I really don't use that much. Some people like to use it because it cooks more evenly. It's been kind of hit or miss for me just because I haven't played around with it enough. But when I cook in these loaf pans, I do it at 350, and I do it for about an hour and 15 minutes, but I'll keep checking it. And to make sure it's done, I usually put a knife in the middle and pull it out. If it comes out clean, I know it's done. So I'm going to check it now. It's been in a little over an hour. Now, some people get really afraid to open up an oven before they are certain that a cake is ready. This cake is very dense, so I don't worry about it falling. I take a knife or a toothpick and I'll check it. So it looks really done at the top, but I put this in the middle. Now see, that's not done. What I do have to worry about is that it's going to get too dark on the top. This is kind of what happens when you cook it on 350. So I'm gonna move these down just so the top won't get too dark, and I'll check it in maybe another 15 minutes just to make sure. Maybe I'll even turn the light on. So I think I put it on for an hour and a half, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, but I'll come back. You see, that's not done. Had I just looked at the top of it, would have thought that it was done, but it's clearly not cooked in the middle. So when I check it again in about 15 minutes or so, if it's still not cooking, seems like it's cooking evenly, then I'll maybe put some foil across the top so that it won't keep browning so much on the top, but it can keep cooking in the middle. We'll check it again. So the oven's gone off now. So it's been about an hour and a half, and it's getting really dark. I don't mind the crispy edges on this, but it just depends on how you like your cakes. Again, if it's cooking too fast, you can turn the oven down. The original recipe calls for it at 300, but I do it on 350. So we're going to test it again, see if this is ready. Look at there, it's ready. And I know it's ready because now I'm not getting anything, just a little bit on the knife. Now I'm going to do something I don't recommend that you do, but I'm going to do it for purposes of being able to show you and cut into this cake. We really should let this cool down at least 30 minutes. Sometimes with this cake, if I let it get completely cool, it sticks to the sides of the pan. Sometimes half the cake will be left in the pan. But again, I'm not the professional cook. This is, we're just going to call it Keisha's Kitchen. So this is just for the family. I'm not good on presentation. In fact, that really is my weak spot. I'm just all about how it tastes, not always how it looks. These pans are hot, so I'm going to use my towels here, and I just shook it a little bit so we can see how. Oh, that's perfect. I always take my finger along this pan and eat the rest of it. So that turned out actually pretty good. I'm very happy to see that. Some people like this cake hot. Sometimes I will put to the side some whipped cream, some frozen strawberries. You can do blueberries and, sprinkle it on top. Some people like it with coffee. We're going to see. Again, when I'm serving this for a lot of people, I always cut this cake up just so I can manage how many slices people get at a time. And then I will usually put it on a plate like this, and you can't smell it, but it smells so good, and it's piping hot. And I give these out as Christmas gifts because I can bake multiple ones at a time. Again, I don't fancy myself a professional cook. I'm just sharing with you all what I like to do. Again, I'm not the best with presentation. Again, it's interesting to me. Sometimes when this cake is so hot, I can't taste the flavoring as much as when it settles, and like the next day is when I really, really, really like it. So now we're gonna give it a taste and see. You want a taste of it? See what this tastes like. This is Jamie who's gonna taste our cake. Mmm. Mmm. Can you taste it?
I know what it's going to taste like when it settles.
Mm-hmm.
I see what's happening.
You see what I mean?
It is different warm than...
It's good. You have to wait for it to cool. I'm going to put this one probably I'll put it at 7 today. Just because I could have mixed it maybe a little longer, so it would have been a little lighter. But by tomorrow, it'll be about a 9. What about you?
I rated an 8.5 because I taste the balance of the vanilla and the almond, and the edges are nice and crispy.
It's really interesting. No, I'm obviously not a chemist, but I wonder why is that you, not a chemist nor a professional cook, why is it that you cannot taste the flavors as much while it's warm? Why does it have to cool? I don't know. Maybe somebody can put it in the comment section and tell me why. You guys drop me a comment in the comment section once you bake this cake and tell me what you think and what kind of flavors you play around with in your pound cakes, because I love to try new things. I got a little more time on my hands. I get to play around in the kitchen a little more in between all the other stuff I have going on, but get to do things I love again. And I love that. Thank you for joining us.